how do we come to be the people that we are today? Is it nature or is it nurture? When we were expecting our first child, I was squarely on team nurture. Humans are socially conditioned beings. We just need to get the right conditions. So as soon as my wife tested pregnant, of course, she's the one that had to do all the work. She quit the alcohol and caffeine, did the prenatal yoga, took the folate pills. Our first child was an ounce shy of 11 pounds. Yeah, take that one. Physically and developmentally months ahead of the curve. So in that first year, cloth diapers, organic foods, lullabies, and somewhere around a year in, a personality emerged. A loud, intense personality. A little defensively, I said, well, that's so strange because my parents described me as a little Buddha. A little defensively, my wife said, that's so odd. My parents described me as a very easy baby. So maybe it's not 80% nurture and 20% nature. Maybe it's like 70-30. Then the second pregnancy. We did all the same things, set up the ideal conditions, and then again, a year in, a personality emerges. Also very loud. Also very intense, but also very different from the first. Maybe it's 60-40. Now, this question really matters. If the main question in social ethics is, what do we owe each other? Then the subsidiary question for parents is, what do we owe our children? Let's frame it this way. If it's 100% nature, if you come out exactly as you are, then you, my dear child, don't need me. We can just lay our eggs on the beach and then flap back into the ocean and swim away. You'll come out of your egg and you already are exactly as you are. If it's 100% nurture, and you're this lump of clay that we, the parents, need to shape into a cogent being, then it's entirely our work. But if it's somewhere in between, heaven help us. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I think Father's Day is one of those holidays that was intended to sell Hallmark cards and lawnmowers. But I think it sticks as a holiday because it gets at the heart of what it means to be a person. You are alive because other people created you. And it's good to remember that from time to time in case you forget. You are your grandmother's prayers and your grandfather's dreaming. You are the breath of your ancestors. You didn't come from nothing. And so we set aside days like this to reflect on what that means. The thing is that reflective process is not always something that stirs gratitude and connection. For some, it does. I love my dad, or I loved my dad and I miss him. And then for some, it elicits the response, it's complicated. And then there's some for whom Father's Day is a day of lament and woundedness. And I just want to say for you, I see you and I hold you in love. And that's the problem with Hallmark holidays, is they never quite capture the complexity. My wife and I raised those two biological children into adulthood. They are out of the nest now. And we are now raising 3 foster adopted children. And we've fostered 6 other children that are no longer in our home. And it's weird to say that I've been a dad to 11 kids at some point. You would think that at some point I'd get better at being a dad. But I'm on a rant about this. People misunderstand the Anders Ericsson study on 10,000 hours. They think, they hear the blip about it and they think you just have to put in 10,000 hours to be good at something. But you know someone who golfs 36 holes every day and is a terrible golfer. What Anders Ericsson said is it's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice with an expert coach. Yeah, I've had tens of thousands of hours of being a dad, but I've been making it up all the time. I will say, though, with a lot of repetition, that I've given it some thought, and here's what I've arrived at. When you're raising a child, there are three things you need to do. Teach the child that they are loved. Teach them how to survive in this world, and teach them how to play well with others. They're loved, how to survive, how to play well with others. I think that'll get you most of the way there. And if we were beginning a new society out of nothing with those parameters, I think it would be easy peasy. I would say 90% nurture, 10% nature. The problem is that we're raising kids in this world, and this world is very old indeed. And it has been shaped for centuries by people doing mean things, for people doing mean things. And it has been in families that are wounded and continue to wound. We're not starting from scratch. So for starters, it's hard to teach your child that they're loved if you don't feel that way about yourself. It's hard to teach your child that they're loved if you don't feel that way. If I polled the room, and I will not, but if I polled the room and said, raise your hand if you feel like you love yourself unconditionally and fully, I would get a silence that breaks the heart. And there's a lot to blame for that. Capitalism teaches us that we're not yet whole and we're not yet complete until we buy the next thing. Your sense of inadequacy is the financial engine of the world. The theology that shaped America, America's founding documents and laws and systems and ways of being, taught that you are garbage, but you may yet be saved from the trash can if you do everything just right. But the main reason it's hard to teach a child that they're loved is that you weren't taught that you were unconditionally loved, not fully and wholly. Intergenerational trauma is passed ancestor to ancestor. And so in your lifetime, you do the best you can to soften the hard edges that you experienced, but you're also introducing new hard edges that your children take to therapy. Okay, teaching inherent worth is going to fly against the market, it's going to fly against American culture, it flies against your own psychology, so let's just get 2 out of 3. Let's teach your children how to survive in the world. That's the one that keeps dads up late at night. How to survive in the world. Optimistically, maybe we mean not survive, thrive. How can I help my child thrive in this world? How do I help them live their best life? And friends, we've got some great exemplars, some paragons of emotional availability. I'm talking about TV dads. Whether you grew up watching the Waltons or the Brady Bunch or Family Ties or Home Improvement or Blackish, it's the same plot every week. Dad is always off at work, not doing any of the caregiving, but at the end of the episode, he's magically there at the side of the kid's bed to just drop some life wisdom. It's this scene with the underscoring in the background. Hey, champ. I'm really disappointed that you stole apples from Old Man Johnson's orchard. But I'm so proud of you for admitting it. And I know you're not going to like spending Saturday weeding the orchard, but you're making it right. Thanks, emotionally available TV dad. It's so relatable how I can just sit at the side of my kid's bed after an 80-hour work week, offer a few observational sentences, and change the way they behave. So maybe we need to be more pessimistic. Maybe it's, how do we literally teach our children how to survive in this world? And by that I mean, to be socialized as a man in America is to be socialized into a cult of righteous violence. I should say that one again, but I won't. Okay. John Wayne and Clint Eastwood, Stallone and Schwarzenegger, The Rock. We've got generation after generation, a mind-numbing avalanche of movies that teach us in mind-numbing ways that men are supposed to be improbably strong, emotionally removed, exceptionally well-trained, hyper-focused, violent loners. Rambo doesn't have time to tuck in the kids at night because he's busy cauterizing the bullet hole in his abdomen with the hunting knife that he stuck into a fire. That's a real scene from Rambo 2. Rambo doesn't know how to help Susie apply for college, but Rambo can take out a battalion with a little bit of C4 and a lot of moxie. Please understand that neither Mike Brady nor Rambo works in this actual world. Mike Brady is a Southern California architect who has infinite time for 6 kids' shenanigans. That man doesn't exist. And Rambo's a psychopath. But if we as men toggle between these two archetypes of what it means to be a man, what it means to survive in the world, we teach our kids something else than what we meant. For example, we scream at our kids when they forget their clarinet on band days at school. That's a Rambo response to a Mike Brady problem. All right, I'm 0 for 2, right? Teaching kids their inherent worth is hard, and teaching them how to survive is too complicated. Let's go to the easy one, step 3. Teach your kids how to play well with others. What could be simpler? Say please and thank you. Ask other people about their interests and don't do all the talking. Don't call people names. Don't talk behind people's backs. Don't harm people with your words or actions. And that would be good, except that none of us have followed all of those rules in the last 4 days. And I'm expecting my 6-year-old to. Beyond that, what do we mean by when we say play well with others? Do we want a conflict-avoidant people pleaser? Or do we want someone who stands up to bullies? Okay, these 3 goals of parenting are harder than I thought. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. We can't reset the clock, we can't start the world over, and we ourselves come into this world wounded, and then we raise kids in this damaged world, and they're damaged by it. Some more than others. Some kids are not the beneficiaries of folate pills and prenatal yoga. Some kids swim in a placental bath of methamphetamines and heroin. Your equation as a dad for nature and nurture shifts when the child you're raising was born addicted to cocaine. When the neural networks at their most fragile are scrambled eggs. So how do you teach that child that they are inherently loved when they were neglected and abandoned for the first years of their lives, when you're their 6th foster placement in a year? In that child's mind, the evidence suggests the reverse. I am disposable. I am unlovable. I am the problem. How do you teach your child how to survive in this world if they're already waking up in fight or flight state? How many times does your 1st grader need to be suspended from school for punching every time he feels threatened by anyone before you, as a dad, realize that your Mike Brady pep talks are not sufficient, nor can you Rambo your way through this problem? And given that your child hates himself and the world cannot operate in it safely, how do you teach them to play well with others? I've often fantasized about saying to foster kids in my care, whatever your instinct is to do in that moment, do the reverse. What do we owe our children? Here's the simple truth about being a father that nobody wants to say out loud. The only requirement for becoming someone's father, literally the only thing you have to do to become a father, is have unprotected sex. That's it. Sometimes you can become a father with protected sex, and IVF works too. But my point is this: there are no qualifications, there's no training, there's no licensure, there's no checkpoints. You could be 13 or 63. You could be a child psychologist or a convicted murderer. You could be married. You might not even know the name of the person you're creating this child with. You have to take 2 to 4 years of college-level courses to become a dental hygienist, and I'm actually very grateful for that. But you don't take anything to become a father. You can become a father in minutes. For many people, it's actually the easiest and frankly most enjoyable part of your life is becoming a father. Becoming a dad is the hard part. Becoming a dad is a lifelong journey, and it's filled with tens of thousands of hours of doing the best you can, which is often not very good. The more I think about my 3 adopted kids' biological fathers, the more compassion I have for them. And that's not a nature thing, that's a nurture thing from spiritual practice. I know it sounds shocking because of the real and great harms they've done to my kids. But that's my point. In order for me to judge them, I would have to assume that they had a steady supply of diapers and food and childcare breaks. And boy, is that a lot of assuming. And even if they did, the only way you don't feed and change your child regularly is if you yourself are so hurt, so wounded, so afflicted with depression or addiction that you can't hear your baby crying over the voices in your head. And the longer I meditate on that, the more compassion I have for the wounds that those men carry. And let me say briefly that one of my children's fathers inherited, in addition to all of that, the generational traumas of 246 years of enslavement, 99 years of Jim Crow, sundown towns, redlining, over-policing, and undereducating efforts of racism. That liberating message of Juneteenth failed to survive the short-lived Reconstruction, and my son's father has been trampled down by the cumulative effects of a system designed to trample him down. And the longer I meditate on that, the less I judge him, and the more I spend time sending him compassion. And if I can find myself holding compassion and even forgiveness for these fathers, I wonder if that can be extended to other fathers. My father's father's father, my great-grandfather, moved from Germany to America in 1917 to start his new family. Had my grandfather, and then died in 1918 in the flu epidemic, before his son turned 18 months. And so I think about what it must have been like to be my paternal grandfather, being raised in the Great Depression, and then in World War II, as a burden to his extended family. And I begin to see, maybe, why he wasn't as open-minded as I wish he was. And I imagine my father, hi Deb, being raised by him, and I begin to see why my father was so task-oriented. And I hope my sons understand why I am the way I am. No one starts at square one. We all come from something, and that something is usually nursing wounds. So let's ask the question differently. What do we owe our parents? After all, somebody gave you dimples, or those deep blue eyes, or that silly cowlick in the back. Somebody also gave you that tendency toward depression or anxiety, that high cholesterol or bad eyesight. Team nature will always make a showing in who you are. And it's good, and it's bad, and it's ugly. So we may find ourselves today giving a sort of qualified gratitude for the biological fathers in our lives. And it would go like, thank you for this gift of the ancestors that I cook without ever looking at the recipe, or that I do Sudoku so quickly. And I forgive you, my ancestors, for the nearsightedness and the soft enamels on my teeth. I think by the time we get to adulthood, we get pretty good at processing the gifts and the harms of team nature. It's team nurture where our compassion runs a little drier. Yeah. Dad, I needed you to be more patient with me. I wish you could have focused less on how I'll survive and more on how worthwhile I was. Or Dad, I never knew you and I don't know how to forgive your absence. So let me just say here, in case I haven't yet, I'm not a fan of forced gratitude. That's offloading the grief process with a fake smile. So if there's nothing redeemable for you on a day like this with teen nurture, this is a hard day, and I see you, and you do not need to buy that Hallmark card. But for some people, the relationship with Dad was good. Sometimes it's even great, despite his lack of qualifications or coursework or training, despite the intergenerational traumas he came into, despite the Mike Brady Rambo world he was socialized in. Maybe he was a pretty good dad. Maybe not as compassionate as fake Mike Brady, maybe not as resilient as psychopath Rambo. But he did what he could. He was, just dad. Thanks for doing what you could. Hey, you did what you could is not a Hallmark card. But First Church, it should be. It should be a Hallmark card, and we would give it to dads on Father's Day. We would give it to moms on Mother's Day. We'd give it to students at graduation. We'd give it to ourselves every day. Come home from work, hey, you did what you could. Congratulations on sharing the gifts that Team Nature and Team Nurture have brought into you. Thank you for mitigating the harms that Nature and Nurture have brought into your life. I've given up on the Nature and Nurture math because children are born into the mess of this world with untrained and unqualified parents, mostly recreating whatever they learned. I'm just dad. And I'm pretty sure I will never be able to teach all 3 lessons well. So from henceforth, I'm going to focus my energy on that first step. Do you know that you are loved? Because First Church, I have tried 10,000 times to teach my children how to survive and play well with others. And it turns out you can do that while also screaming at your children, fighting them, arguing, shaming, threatening them. You can teach a behavior with so much anger and fear and hurt, mostly fear. And to be honest, I don't know that I'll ever be able to teach these 3, how to survive and how to play well in this world with others, given the cards that are stacked against them. But I'm pretty sure about this. If every dad in the world oriented 90% of their parenting efforts towards affirming how much they love their children, we'd get a lot closer to resetting that system. And we can't do that until we do that work for ourselves. So we gather here in the spiritual community every week to do the work, to practice seeing one another wholly as complex, loving, and lovable people. Neither perfect nor trash, but just Jeremy, just Alyssa, just Dad. And maybe, just maybe, one day, we'll all be ready to teach the children the only lesson they ever really wanted to hear. You are enough, and I love you. Amen.